Today I'll be showing you how to turn a slow, boring office computer into a fully fledged gaming PC. Most people have an old computer just like this one, just gathering dust somewhere in the garage. But many of these puppies actually have some really good parts in them that can easily be reused. So if you're on a budget, you could turn that dusty computer into a gaming beast for pretty damn cheap. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the Backrooms, boys. I'll be your host today. These are all the things you need before starting this transformation. First of all, the most important thing, your own handsome self, of course. Oh, you're looking real good today. Have you been working out? Of course, you're gonna need that desktop PC that I was talking about. I'm using this Lenovo IdeaCentre 510S, which is your run-of-the-mill small form factor office PC. Of course, you can use any other PC, but the adapters I use in this video are meant for this desktop specifically. Next, you'll need just a regular Phillips head screwdriver. You'll also need a standard issue military M9 bayonet knife. I'm just kidding, I just wanted to show off this knife. You just need something sharp for cutting, so scissors will work as well. Next, you'll need an external USB 3.0 to internal USB 3.0 adapter. You'll also need a 24-pin to 9-pin power supply adapter. These can easily be found on AliExpress for like $3 from reliable sellers like Guangzhou Jingfang Dianzi Shangwu You Zhangongxi. I mean, everybody knows Guangzhou, right? You'll also need extra RAM, but the amount depends on how much you want to put in it. I would recommend at least 16 gigabytes of RAM, but it really depends on how much there's already in there and what speed your PC supports. The ones I have here are DDR4 3200 MHz, which is plenty fast enough. You'll also need a new power supply. The wattage depends on what GPU you put in here, and just watch out that you have enough 6+2 pin PCIe power ports, so that graphics card can actually get the power that it needs. Then we'll need a nice powerful GPU to pair with the system. I went with the GTX 1080, so it's not super good or anything, but it'll be plenty for this build. And lastly, you need a very pretty case to put that all in. RGB is required. All in all, this should make for a pretty damn nice budget gaming PC. Yeah, you could also just slap a low-profile graphics card in here, but where's the fun in that? Doing this will make it a lot faster and, more importantly, a lot prettier. We're gonna start by taking out everything that we can reuse from the old office PC. First, let's take off the side panel. We'll also need to take off the front panel, since we need to open this door right here. Just like this. And then we just click it open. And there's all the guts. Obviously, we're going to reuse the motherboard. And there's also a memory stick in there, but I'm just gonna replace it with 2 sticks anyways. You could also just add a single memory stick, but if it's not the exact same as the other one, it could cause issues. So I'm just gonna play it safe and replace it with 2 memory sticks. And hey, we even have an M.2 slot that houses a Wi-Fi card. Unfortunately, we can't reuse the power supply since it only has 180 watts. Yeah, that's not gonna be enough for that GPU. There's also an SSD and hard drive in here, so I won't have to buy extra storage. All in all, there's quite a bit of stuff that we can reuse. Unfortunately, it does use a 9-pin power adapter instead of a 24-pin, which is ATX standard. So yeah, we're gonna need that adapter that I showed you earlier. I also don't think the power button uses a standard pin layout, so I'm gonna have to see how that works. The ports on the front are also just part of the motherboard, so we're gonna have to bypass that with the blue adapter that I showed you. We can probably get the front USBs to work, but front audio, I don't think so. Other than that, it's pretty doable. So let's get right into it. Let's start by just unplugging everything. Here's the 4-pin CPU power, the connector for the front SD card reader. Hey, this one actually uses the front USB 2.0 connector, so we absolutely can connect front USB. I'm not sure what this cable is, but we're just gonna remove it. Next, I'll remove the DVD drive. Sorry, old man, you're going into the garbage. Next, let's remove the antennas from the Wi-Fi card. Just unscrew the antenna here. Looks like it's inside of this little PCIe bracket, but it's not full size, so we can't reuse it. Next, let's remove that 9-pin cable from the power supply. And then these 2 SATA power cables. And then the SATA data cables. And then we take these out from the drives themselves. We're going to be reusing these SATA data cables, so make sure to keep them around. And then we can take the drives out. So a 240 gigabyte SSD and some kind of hard drive below it. It's actually a 500 gigabyte hard drive, which isn't great, but should be fine for now. Then lastly, that proprietary power button connector. Now let's just get all the cables out of the way so we can get the motherboard out. Now we can unscrew all of the motherboard screws. Apparently we need to remove that SD card screw as well. I've unscrewed everything, but it's still not coming out. I swear to God, if Lenovo is using their case as a CPU cooler bracket again, stay calm, let's not do anything drastic yet. Let's just see whatever's going on. Let's just unscrew the CPU cooler and see what's going on down there. Jesus, this thing probably hasn't been cleaned in like 5 years. How does dust even get brown? Oh shit, it's actually still not coming out. Okay, apparently I have to unscrew the front I/O shield as well. There we go. Yes, finally. Perhaps I treated you too harshly. And yeah, that's pretty much everything we need. There's not really anything else in here that we can reuse. Especially not this power supply thing. I won't bury you together with the Dell Optiplex, don't worry. You've been a good boy so far. Yes. That sure as hell was a lot of screws though. Now you can... No, wait, not yet, not yet, not yet. Is the I/O shield removable? It has some kind of locking mechanism. I don't know if we can reuse this in the other case. Ow, fuck. Hey! Oh shit, yay. An actual removable I/O shield. It did cost me some blood though. You didn't give up without a fight. And that's pretty much everything we need. Now let's upgrade that motherboard of ours. We're gonna be installing 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. But first let's clean that CPU up because brown dust. There's actually already 8 gigabytes of 2666 MHz DDR4 RAM in here. But like I said, pairing up 2 different sticks of RAM can be a bit sketchy. So we're just gonna take it out and replace it with this kit of 16 gigabytes of RAM. No satisfying click unfortunately, but now we have 16 gigs. The thermal paste on here is like semi-solid. Yeah, I'm gonna have to scratch that off. There we go. That's a lot better. We obviously need some new thermal paste. And now we can place back the old cooler. And there we go. Now we're done with the motherboard. There's an M.2 slot here as well, so I think you'd be able to put an NVMe SSD in there. But there's nowhere to screw it in, so figure it out, I guess. Now we're gonna put everything in the new shiny case. But how are we gonna open this? I told you it'd come in handy eventually. Ah. And voila! This baby has a tempered glass side panel, 3 fans on the front, all RGB of course, and even front USB-C, which we'll probably not even be able to use. Let's open her up and see what's inside. Okay, it has a little more than 3 fans. I don't think this thing is gonna have issues with cooling. And on the back, a bunch of cables that we probably can't use, an RGB controller, and plenty of space for the PSU and hard drives. It's really gonna suck putting all this stuff in here. Let's start by just organizing everything that's already in the case. Here's all the screws and stuff that we need. Now let's see which cables we can actually use and which ones we just set aside. We can absolutely use the front USB 3.0 ports since we have that adapter that we bought. And I actually think we can also just connect the front panel pins. Apparently our motherboard just has a regular front panel pinout. In which case Lenovo is definitely a lot cooler than the other OEM desktop PC makers. And then we can also just connect all the fans with SATA power. Now that we have our cables in check, let's start by inserting our SSD and hard drive into this hard drive bay. This is just a lot of screwing and pushing, so I won't show the entire process since it's pretty boring. Next we need to use these daisy chain cables that came with our case, so we can connect all the fans to just one connector. Yeah, it's not the prettiest sight, but we can't afford luxuries like beauty. Now let's install our power supply. We just shove it into place and then screw it down. And now we have a lot more cables to worry about. I'll just quickly sort out which ones we need and which ones we don't. First, let's attach that 24-pin to 9-pin adapter, so we can just stick it right into the motherboard once we put that in. Then we can attach the case's USB 3.0 connector to that blue adapter we had, so we can stick it into the motherboard again. And lastly, let's connect these 3 SATA power cables to the fan controller in the case, and the SSD and the HDD, so that they all get power. Just like that. And while we're at the back of the case, let's route the cables that we know we need at the front before placing the motherboard in the case. Because once we place the motherboard into the case, some holes will be covered up. So this should make it a lot easier to manage all the cables. And finally, I'll just shove all the clutter in the bottom of the case. It's not pretty, but no one's gonna see this anyways, and it works. Now that we finally have the cables at the front that we need, let's finally put in the motherboard. But first, the I/O shield. Let's try if it fits. Nah, shit. I don't think so. These tabs are blocking the little clips here, so I don't think we'll be able to get it through. That sucks. I mean, it's not a nightmare that we don't have an I/O shield, but I really hope that this would work. No worries, we'll just place the motherboard without an I/O shield then. Now let's see if this thing fits in here. One sec. To my surprise, it seems to fit. Yeah, this isn't very ATX standard or anything, but the standoffs seem to line up. And unlike with the Optiplexes, the front I/O isn't interfering with the case, so it actually just fits. This is very nice. Very, very nice. Yeah, let's just plug stuff in and see if it all goes right. I could only get these 3 screws into place, since the other holes don't really lead anywhere. Even with standoffs, I can't screw it in there. I mean, it's perfectly fine. It stays into place, and that's what matters. But it is a bit bouncy at the bottom. Let's just plug all these things in and then, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, these bright blue cables here aren't very aesthetic or anything, but it'll give us functionality of the front USB ports, so who cares? We just stick them here into the front I/O of the motherboard, just like that. Next up is the 9-pin connector for the power supply. This is a bit tight, but it'll work. There we go. Beautiful. It's just gonna have to be routed a bit weirdly on the back, but it works. That daisy chain cable for the fans can just go right up there. Perfect. And then we click in the SATA data connectors for the hard drive and the SSD. See how I'm blocking that bottom SATA port? Looks real nice, right? Yeah, obviously don't do that yourself. I'm just doing it to make it a bit more sketchy. Next up is the CPU 4-pin power, right there. And then finally, the front panel connectors, which I really hope are standard pinouts. Most normal PCs have a standard front panel pinout. I'll put the one here on the left for you to see. So I really hope it's just that. Yeah, these pins are not standard configuration. They might be the same pinouts, but the pins are way too close to each other, so I can't put 2 next to each other. Yeah, these guys are still assholes. So for now, I just inserted the power button and we'll see if that works. And now finally I have to do something with these antennas. I'm not sure where to put them though. And I don't know what, what this thing's supposed to do. Watch this, you're about to see some incredibly sketchy stuff that probably is not even gonna work, but I tried. I routed one of the cables through this front USB 2.0 header right over here. Routed it through those pins as well. And then I screwed it to an open PCIe bracket. See that? It's stuck. That's perfect. And then the other side that didn't have a part, I just attached to the case so that the case acts like an antenna. I don't know how antennas work, but we'll see if it works. And then lastly, we just need to connect this back fan to the motherboard right over here. Click. There we go. And now we have everything connected, except for the GPU. That one still needs to be inserted. But first I want to fix this mess that I've created here so that the back panel will actually fit on the case. Moment of truth. Oh my god, it just fits. Okay, now I'm gonna screw it in so that it doesn't explode. I would call that job well done, boys. Now let's finally put the GPU in there. First we have to make space for the GPU by taking out these PCI brackets. Alrighty, let's try it. And she fits. Hell yeah. Now all that's left is connecting the PCIe power. Now let's screw it in. And it is done. Now for the most important part. And some final touches. And she is finished. Now let's plug it in and see if it actually boots, and then we'll get on with the Windows installation. Now let's plug in the power supply, the HDMI cable, a mouse and a keyboard. And now the moment of truth. The LEDs light on, but nothing else really happens. So let's press the power button. Hey, that's good. Oh shit. But it's a bit loud. So let's get into the BIOS and see if we can fix this. Windows is already installed on the SSD though, so that's pretty nice. Unfortunately, this BIOS is very bare bones, so yeah. I can't find anything in regards to fan speed, which kinda sucks. I'm gonna try some things and see what happens. I found the issue. This little thing that I didn't know what it was is probably a temperature sensor. And it has to be plugged in. Right here with that green connector thingy. And now it's quiet. And very pretty. I was really afraid that we were gonna have a very loud PC or that we had to unplug the fans or something, but it turned out great. This thing is so damn pretty. And it has way too much air cooling. I wish I had this many fans in my case. I mean, Jesus, look at this. And guess what? The Wi-Fi works, and it also has Bluetooth. Now we have to install the GPU drivers, and of course, benchmark it. Now let's test if the front USB ports work as well. There we go. Now let's install the latest NVIDIA drivers and see what this guy can do. I'm gonna test gaming performance by running 3 games. Battlefield 1, Counter-Strike 2, and Cyberpunk 2077. It obviously won't have any issues with Battlefield 1 since it's such an old game, but I'm really curious to see how it'll perform in Cyberpunk 2077, since that's a really heavy game. Let's start with Battlefield 1.
We have lost objective Charlie.
Now this game came out in 2016, but still has a very loyal player base, and it actually looks better than most games that are released these days. And it doesn't require a very strong PC, so it still runs very nicely, even at the highest settings. Next up is Counter-Strike 2. CS2 is basically just CSGO with better graphics, so it is a bit heavier to run than CSGO, but it's pretty mid-range in terms of requirements. At low to medium settings, it played very nicely. You could even bump it up, but I like to keep my FPS at least above 100. And finally, let's test out if it even runs Cyberpunk 2077. It absolutely does. Even at low to medium settings, this game still looks very nice. And it runs between 60 to 80 FPS, which in my opinion is perfectly fine for such a cheap computer. Obviously you can't expect this thing to run 4K at the highest settings or anything. I mean, it's a really cheap computer. But for the price, the performance is actually really great and better than I expected. So in terms of value, this guy is really, really good. The only slightly negative thing that I've found so far is that when you turn the PC off, the fans RGB don't turn off. This is probably due to that adapter doing some weird stuff. So you'll just have to turn off the power supply when the PC turns off. But other than that, this is one pretty ass gaming computer. And especially for the price, it's definitely worth it. Yeah, we had to do a lot of sketchy things to get there, but I'm pretty proud of the end result. This was really fun to make, and Lenovo didn't make it too hard to upgrade. Yeah, their motherboard did have some proprietary ports, like that front panel connector, and the power supply cable of course, but that's nothing that a couple very cheap adapters won't fix. And that's pretty much it for today, folks. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.